This meeting is now being recorded.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Get On Board So You Want to Be a Board Member webinar. The purpose for this presentation is to inform people of what the next steps are. So you've already learned a little bit about board service, board responsibilities, either through a YouThink seminar or through some other process. And this is really the next step of, okay, now you've decided you do want to get involved. What are some things that you should really be considering? So this is what this presentation is about. The facilitator for today is Michael Davidson. He's been working with nonprofit boards for quite some time, and he'll be taking us through the majority of the slides. But before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about the YouThink process. As I mentioned before, some of you may have already attended a YouThink information session or a seminar. That's usually our first step, and that goes over board roles and responsibilities and really talks about the high levels of what it's going to take to be a board member. The second step is attending this webinar, so you want to be a board member. And then once you're done with this webinar, Janelle or myself, Liz, will reach out to you to schedule a meeting to discuss 3 to 5 nonprofits that you're interested in the most in the YouThink Partner Network. After we've gone through that discussion, you'll make a first choice, and you'll send us your resume and your bio, and then we'll connect you directly to that nonprofit, at which point you'll go through that nonprofit's recruitment process, which really varies from nonprofit to nonprofit. But typically it involves an interview with the executive director or board chair, meeting with a few other board members, going to a site visit, perhaps going to an event, and then getting voted on to the board. So that's the YouThink process. After this presentation, we will put in the chat bar some extra information on how you can contact us. But you can always email us, Janelle or myself. You should have both of our contact information if you have any questions. But we'll put that information again at the very end of the presentation. So with that, I will hand it over to Michael Davidson.
Great. Thank you, Liz. So just as a reminder, so as we're going through this, if you've got questions, just kind of like write them down, and then you can send them in by email to either Liz or Janelle, and they'll respond to it. So what we're going to do with this webinar is really kind of like focus on the factors you want to take into consideration in making a decision about joining a board, and some of the things that you should be prepared for, and some of the process issues going into that. So the first thing that I think it's really important to think about is how you want to be involved and the level of involvement and what you think your involvement is going to look like. And the reason I want to start with that is that nonprofit organizations are all very different, and there are different levels. There are some that are still close to a founding stage, where there are some initial board members and an executive director and some staff, and everybody's kind of like working together, and they're very entrepreneurial. And if that's the kind of environment you feel most comfortable in, that's the kind of board you should want to join. On the other hand, there are some organizations that are much more mature. The boards are much more organized. They know exactly what the committees are doing. There's a division of labor between the committees, clear distinction between what the staff does and what the board does. It's a much more structured environment. And if you find that that's the kind of environment you feel you'd be more comfortable in, so that's the kind of board that you're going to go towards. And of course, then there are some in the middle. The important thing to understand in that particular point of view is that in any board, there are kind of 3 components of board member engagement. One is kind of hands-on work, where you're either maybe even implementing some programs as a mentor or things like that because they don't have the staff, or you're providing personal expertise. So that's that hands-on helping aspect. Then there's the second, which is the oversight aspect, the fiscal review, the mission direction, strategic planning, and things like that. And the third is the fundraising. And those are the 3 components in general terms. And any board that you go on is going to be a mix of those, but it's going to be a different mix. And so you want to explore in the beginning, what is the mix of those 3 kinds of board work as you go through. That's a kind of a first level consideration, which really is your own level of comfort in an organization. You're looking for something entrepreneurial, roll up your sleeves, get in the beginning, things are uncertain, or you'd like to move into something that's a little bit more structured, where it's much clearer the distinctions between roles and things like that. So that's the first level consideration. The second level consideration, or maybe it's the first, it really doesn't, first or second, these are all considerations, is your connection with the mission. And this is really important. A lot is going to be asked of you as a board member. And time commitment, financial commitment, using your networks, all of that kind of stuff. And it's really important that you really care about what this organization is doing, that the outcomes here are really things that are very, very important to you personally. And what's important to each of you personally is going to be very, very different. It's a function of your own personal history, the kinds of things that you personally connect with. And that's going to be important to you. As you look at the organizations within the You Think portfolio, you got to ask yourself, okay, this one's kind of interesting. What is there about this that interests me? What is there about the way in which they're working with young people, their particular approach to this that really resonates for me? And, it's going to be different. And it's kind of a soul-searching process. And in addition, you may not know this in advance. Sometimes, it's kind of like dating, right? You may have a long list of people, of characteristics of the perfect person that you want to have a date with, and then you meet somebody, and they're none of those characteristics, but there's something about them that resonates for you. And it's the same thing with nonprofits. So you want to think about what your priorities are and what resonates for you, but at the same time be open to maybe it's going to be something that you hadn't thought of in the first place. So that's an important piece for it. The next thing to think about, and this will kind of come up as you look at organizations, but also from your own point of view, we know all of the work, we'll talk about the work that you're going to do for the nonprofits, but in addition to caring deeply about the mission, the other thing that's going to make this work for you is what you get out of it. And this is not selfishness. This is like we do volunteer work. You've all done volunteer work all of your lives, probably starting in kindergarten, if not before. And we learn to do it because it really brings rewards. We do things good in the world, and it feeds us back. And so part of the thing you want to be thinking about as you're looking at nonprofits, what am I going to get out of this? How am I going to grow? And there are a number of ways in which that's important. And let me just... I got talking and I forgot about the slides. I apologize. Okay, so now we're on the personal objectives. And, one of them is learning. Is this a nonprofit where I'm going to get exposed to something brand new? Learn about new communities, new people, new ways of doing things, new kinds of activities, new issues. Am I going to learn something? How am I going to use my skills? And importantly, is there going to be an opportunity for me to use my skills in a different way, to grow, to develop new skills, to enhance my skills, to grow both personally and professionally in this process? Because that's one of the reasons why we all do this. Are these communities that the organization is dealing with, are they communities that I want to connect with? Is it new for me? Is it of interest to me? What's the team look like? Are these people that really interest me, that I would like to work with, that I want to be partners with? And when I say the team, I'm referring really to the other members of the board and the executive director. And also, if you get a chance, depending upon the organizations, we'll talk about the recruitment process. If you could ask them if you could attend the board meeting, that would be great. This is a real way for you to get a feeling, is this a team I want to be involved in? And finally, is the work I'm going to do have a significant impact on an issue that's important to you? And that goes back again to the mission thing. Is the work that this organization is accomplishing, from my point of view, really important in the world? And that's going to be different again for each of us. Okay. In thinking about the organizations, there are also some resources outside of what the organization can provide you and outside of what you think will provide you that you can take a look at. One is GuideStar.org. GuideStar.org is a website. It's free. every nonprofit, the 990 of every nonprofit, and the 990 is their informational tax return that they file with the Internal Revenue Service every year. Their 990 is available in a PDF on GuideStar. It's free. It's usually about, 2 years behind, but it'll give you a good sense of the organization, its finances, more about what it does, how it's organized, how the board is structured, and things like that. Another resource is a website called Charity Navigator. This is a website that ranks nonprofits according to certain kinds of algorithms, and nonprofits apply to be ranked. And again, you can look at what the ranking is and what they tell you about the nonprofit there. Similarly, there's the Better Business Bureau. It's an area in the Better Business Bureau called the Wise Giving Alliance, and they do a ranking again against different criteria. But it's, again, another potential source. And then sort through their websites. Organizations are now putting more and more internal information up on their website. You may find a copy of their last audit report. You may find a copy of their budget. You certainly are going to find a list of the board members and hopefully their affiliations. So this is kind of online research that you can do as you're taking a look at it. Okay. Now, when you meet the organization, what I've given you here is really a list of questions. And, obviously this is not every question. You're not going to ask every question, but it's the kind of questions you might ask. And look at it just as you would a job interview. You walk into a job interview, you've got in your mind, or maybe even down on a yellow sheet of paper, the questions that you want to ask the organization to decide whether or not this is the place you want to go. So they're going to have questions they want to ask about you, and you should have questions that you want to ask about them. And so let me just walk you through this list of questions, because I think they're quite helpful. One is, what have the board committees been doing? Do they have committees, first of all? And second, what is the work that the committees have been doing? What have they accomplished? That's an important question, but sometimes they got committees and they're there in name only, and they haven't really done anything, and they're not clear about what their job is. So what have these committees been doing? What have they accomplished? I'd ask them straightforward. What do you regard as the strengths of your board? What do you regard as its weaknesses? Hopefully they'll tell you. They'll tell you all about strengths, but, let's see how candid they are about where they feel they need development and what's important. And in that is, how are you going to use me? Do you see me as part of the solution to whatever weakness and lacks that you're finding on the board? I'd want to know how long the current officers and committee chairs have held their positions. You want to see an organization that rotates its leadership. You don't want to see the same people. You don't want an organization where the same person's been the chair for 20 years. That tells you that they got a problem, right? Either that person won't get out of the chair, or they can't find anybody else to get into the chair. So it's an issue. You could ask them, why has this person been there for 20 years? And it'd be interesting to see what their answer is. How do they develop new leadership? How do they move people into positions of leadership in committees and so on and so forth? Straightforward, how are you going to use me? What is there about my skills and my background that attracts you to me? And how do you think I will be involved? What committee would I work on? And so on and so forth. An important area is going to be the financial contribution. And you want to be clear about a number of things. Number one, what is the expectation? And you think I'll explain all this to you as you go forward about the notion of a give and get, or give or get, which basically means everybody's expected to write a check on some level, and in addition to bring in some level of money. I'd want to know, how much has the rest of the board been doing? How active is the board as a whole in doing that? I don't want a board that's looking for me as the only fundraiser, right? I want to know that there's a culture of that's been going on. I also want to know, how are you going to connect me with the program? Because you can't really be, I don't think, a really responsible board member without really understanding the business of the organization. And the only way to understand the business of the organization is to visit it, to see it, to talk to staff, to ask people questions. So how do they do that? How do they do that? You want to know. How do they orient new board members? How are you going to help me? What information are you going to give me? How are you going to help me adjust to the organization? That's an important kind of question. And again, my question from before, can I watch a board meeting? And also, am I going to be the only person on the board under 70 years old, right? Are there other people in my age group that I could speak with about the board and that I can see as kind of peer partners on the board? So these are a number of kinds of things, and obviously when you're in the interview, you're going to come up with some others. But you really, again, it's due diligence. It's the same kind of due diligence that you would use for any kind of job interview, and take it in that form. Okay. Once you're on a board, there are a number of ways in which you could be involved. For sure, you're going to ask to be on a committee, and you want to know what committee it's going to be. Sometimes you might be asked to co-lead something. For example, very often, new board members, especially in organizations that are involved in Youth Inc., come in as kind of co-chairs of the celebration event. And it's a good way to begin to take a leadership role and to make an impact on the board. And that's an important kind of side point. People often ask me, well, how do I get into leadership positions on the board? How do I get to the point where people listen to my opinions? The reality is you get to that point by getting the job done. The people that get the job done are the people that get the respect on the board. It's just that simple. It is really, at the end of the day, basically a meritocracy. I mean, by getting the job done, by doing it, people rise into those levels. Later on, maybe become an officer, secretary, treasurer, vice chair, and hopefully sooner or later the chair of the board. Now, once you get on, what are the kinds of things that you feel you want to make sure happen to help you get acclimated? The first thing is, I think you really want to have a board mentor. Some organizations build this in. They automatically assign every new board member to a current board member, someone to teach them the ropes, sit down, have coffee, have lunch, pick up the phone, answer questions, someone that will give you, well, what's really going on at this meeting? I couldn't understand what was happening here, why there was silence or why there was whatever, and this one wasn't talking and that one was talking. Somebody you got to know who can tell you, let me tell you what's going on here, and explain the dynamics of things and how things work. So you want to get, and if they don't assign a board member. Second, site visits. You got to get out there. Now, there's always an issue in a nonprofit of the way in which board members relate to staff. And you've got to be very respectful of that, right? So if you're going out on a site visit and you're meeting with staff, your job is not to tell them how to do their job, nor is your job to listen to their complaints, if they have any, about their job. You're there is to look and observe. If some of that stuff comes up, you say, look, this is not something I can talk to you about. You really have to talk to your supervisor. That's not the role of a board member. So you're there out to learn about the program, but to make sure you're not crossing the bounds of where it's the executive director's authority. Then, like everything else, what am I going to read? What's the documents that I can read that are going to help me come up to this? And let me kind of just go through them. We list them here. One, I think you should read the bylaws. The bylaws are the governing document. They tell you how the board operates. Many boards now will have a list of very specific expectations. This is what board members are expected to do. Come to so and so many meetings, so many site visits, whatever it is. Do they have written expectations? What's the current budget? I'd like to see the current budget so I can understand that and talk to somebody about it so I can get an understanding of it. Last year's audit, an important thing to do. Is there a strategic plan? Can I get a copy of it? Can I see it? I'd want to see the board minutes from the last few meetings. It'll give you a sense of how things operate and what happens at board meetings. You want a board contact list, staff directory, a really good document to get a good sense of how the organization sees it is a grant application. So if they could share with you a sample grant application that they sent to one or another foundation, it'll really describe how the organization sees itself. And then, ask the chair and the executive director, what else do I need to know? And hopefully they'll help you. You want to make sure that you have a meeting, a one-on-one meeting with the executive director, so that this is your opportunity, even after once you're on the board, to really get an overview of the organization, of the detail. And I'd want to ask the director, which of the senior staff can I meet with? Who do you think I should meet with? Because I really want to understand the business of the organization. I'm not going to interfere. I'm not going to try to tell them how to do their job, but I need to understand it from their point of view. Then last but not least, you want to meet with the chair to find out what your committee assignment's going to be. And in this, an important thing is, at the end of the day, you never want to let yourself get pigeonholed. Yes, you're a finance person in the beginning. They need you on the finance committee. That's fine. That's what they need you to do. But you always want to be open to getting into new areas that are not your day job expertise. On the program committee, on the fundraising committee, on the personnel committee, on the board governance committee. Because part of what you want to do is you want to grow. And you don't just want to be using just the skills that you have. You want to see what other skills you have and other ways that you can really contribute. So that's, while your initial assignment may really be based upon your professional expertise, you want to see that as you go along, things open up for you, and there are other possibilities for you. And that really is kind of it. I think we've really covered the basics here, but I really want to encourage you, after this is over, you do have questions, reach out. And one thing that's important to understand is that you think is really going to be behind you all the way through. They've got resources available. There's staff here that you can call, ask questions of. There are going to be lots of workshops that they offer. You want to get that expertise. And also look for workshops outside of YouThink. There's lots of stuff in New York City going on in a variety of places. The Support Center for Nonprofit Management. There's lots of workshops on all kinds of board matters, financial management, strategic planning, and they're half-day workshops. Things where you can really, board development, strategic planning, financial management, all of those kinds of questions. Another group is called Volunteer Consulting Group, which is linked with Governance Matters. They do regular programs just for boards and just for board members. So there's a lot of resources out there in the community for you, so you don't feel like you're just being cut off at the end. And so, talking about not being cut off on the end, Liz is going to come back in here for just a couple last words.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you, everyone, for joining this webinar. As I mentioned in the very beginning, you can contact us. I also set a chat in the chat box with our contact information, so please feel free with any questions to reach out to us. Janelle will also be reaching out to everyone who joined the webinar to follow up and get some time on the calendar to discuss the nonprofits in the YouThink Partner Network, and then work with you to get you onto a nonprofit board. So those will be the immediate next steps. Expect an email from us, and we will be in touch. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good day.